Sarah Martinez had always been drawn to the ocean's treasures. Every morning at sunrise, she would walk the pristine beaches of Cornwall, England, searching for the perfect shells that the tide brought in during the night. Her collection had grown over 15 years into something extraordinary. Rare cowries from distant waters, delicate angel wings, and spiraled nautilus chambers that caught the light like precious gems. On this particular October morning, the beach stretched empty before her, mist rising from the waves as they crashed against the rocky coastline. Sarah carried her worn leather bag, the same one her grandmother had used decades earlier for the same purpose. She moved slowly, methodically, her trained eye scanning the sand for unusual shapes and colors that didn't belong to the common local varieties. The fog was thicker than usual, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere as she worked her way along the shoreline. She had discovered this particular stretch of beach 3 years ago, and it had become her secret spot. Tourists rarely ventured this far from the main coastal path, leaving the treasures untouched for someone who truly appreciated their beauty. She bent to examine what appeared to be a rare pink murex shell. Something unusual caught her attention. About 200 meters up the beach, partially hidden behind a large piece of driftwood, she noticed what looked like camping equipment. This was strange because camping wasn't permitted on this section of coastline, and the nearest official campground was miles away. Her curiosity got the better of her and she began walking toward the mysterious setup. As she drew closer, she could make out a small, well-concealed tent in military green, positioned strategically behind natural cover. Next to it, she spotted something that made her heart race with both excitement and concern. A long, sophisticated-looking rifle with a powerful scope mounted on a tripod, pointed out toward the sea. The equipment was clearly professional grade, far beyond anything a casual hunter or sport shooter would own. The rifle itself was immaculate, obviously well-maintained and expensive. Sarah had grown up around firearms. Her father had been a competitive marksman, so she recognized quality when she saw it. This weapon was designed for extreme precision, at very long distances. She stood frozen, unsure whether to retreat quietly or call out to whoever might be nearby. The fog swirled around her, making the entire scene feel surreal and slightly threatening. Her heart pounded as she realized she might have stumbled upon something she wasn't supposed to see. Just then, a voice called out from behind the driftwood barrier. The accent was distinctly British, educated and surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "I see you found my little observation post," the voice said with what sounded almost like amusement. "I must say you're quite the early riser." A tall figure emerged from behind the concealment, a man in his 40s with weathered features and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was dressed in neutral outdoor clothing that seemed designed to blend with the coastal environment. Despite the potentially alarming situation, his demeanor was relaxed and non-threatening. "I'm David Thompson," he said, extending his hand in a gesture that seemed completely normal under the circumstances. "And you must be the shell collector I've been watching work this beach for the past several days. You have an excellent eye for spotting treasures hidden in plain sight." Sarah found herself shaking his hand almost automatically, though her mind was racing with questions and concerns. "Sarah Martinez," she managed to say. "I'm sorry if I'm trespassing on something private. I had no idea anyone was using this area." David smiled, and she noticed it reached his eyes, making him seem more approachable despite the intimidating equipment surrounding them. "Actually, you're not trespassing at all. This is public land, and you have every right to be here collecting your shells. I'm the one who set up temporary camp without proper permits." He gestured toward the rifle with casual familiarity. "I suppose you're wondering about the hardware. I'm what you might call a precision shooting enthusiast, though my background is a bit more formal than most hobbyists. Former British Army, specialized in long-range marksmanship." Sarah's tension began to ease slightly as David's manner remained conversational and friendly. "I was actually just finishing up some practice when I noticed your systematic approach to shell hunting. It's quite impressive, really. The way you read the beach, understand where the currents deposit the best specimens. It takes real skill and patience." The fog was beginning to lift as the sun climbed higher, revealing more details of David's sophisticated setup. Besides the primary rifle, she could see range-finding equipment, weather monitoring devices, and charts that appeared to show tidal patterns and wind conditions. "What exactly are you practicing for out here?" Sarah asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her initial caution. David's expression became more serious, though still friendly. Long-range precision shooting is both an art and a science. It requires understanding of ballistics, weather conditions, target movement, and dozens of other variables. I come to remote locations like this to test my skills against challenging conditions. He pointed out toward the horizon where several large rocks jutted up from the water at various distances. Those natural targets out there present interesting challenges, different ranges, different sizes, affected by sea conditions and changing light. It's excellent practice for maintaining skills that took years to develop. Sarah found herself genuinely intrigued, despite the unusual circumstances. "How far out are those rocks?" "The furthest one I've been working with is approximately 4,500 meters, David replied matter-of-factly. "It's an extremely challenging shot under the best conditions, nearly impossible with the variable winds and atmospheric conditions we get here on the coast." As they talked, Sarah noticed that David's eyes frequently scanned the horizon and surrounding area with the automatic vigilance of someone trained in tactical awareness. Yet his conversation remained engaging, and his interest in her shell collecting seemed genuine. The morning sun was now burning off the last of the fog, revealing the full beauty of the coastline they both shared. Sarah realized this chance encounter had transformed her routine morning walk into something completely unexpected, and she found herself wondering what other surprises this mysterious marksman might have in store. Over the next several days, Sarah found herself returning to the same stretch of beach, ostensibly to continue her shell collecting but increasingly curious about David and his precision shooting practice. Each morning she would find him already, set up in slightly different positions, always with the same meticulous attention to concealment and equipment arrangement. David seemed genuinely pleased to see her each day, and their conversations gradually became more comfortable and wide-ranging. He shared stories of his military service, including deployments to Afghanistan, where his marksmanship skills had been put to life-and-death tests. Sarah told him about her work as a marine biology teacher and her passion for understanding the ocean's ecosystems through the shells that washed ashore. What struck her most was David's scientific approach to his shooting. He maintained detailed logs of every shot: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and the results of each attempt. His notebooks were filled with calculations and diagrams that looked more like physics equations than anything related to firearms. Most people think long-range shooting is just about having a good rifle and steady hands, David explained as he showed her his data collection process. But at extreme distances, you're really solving a complex physics problem in real time. The bullet's path is affected by gravity, wind drift, air density, even the rotation of the Earth. Sarah was fascinated by the mathematical precision involved. As a science teacher, she appreciated the methodical approach and the way David treated each shot as an experiment with measurable variables and outcomes. It reminded her of her own systematic approach to cataloging shells based on species, origin points, and tidal patterns. On the fourth morning of their encounters, David seemed more focused than usual. He had positioned himself at a different angle, and his equipment setup was more elaborate. Additional measuring devices were deployed, and he had several pages of handwritten calculations spread out on a waterproof mat. "Today's the day I attempt the 4,500-meter shot," he announced when Sarah approached. "Conditions are as close to ideal as I'm likely to get. Light winds, stable barometric pressure, and excellent visibility." Sarah looked out toward the distant rock formation he had been targeting all week. Even with the clearer conditions, it appeared impossibly small and remote. She could barely make it out without squinting, and the idea that someone could hit such a tiny target from this distance seemed almost superhuman. "Have you ever made a shot that far before?" she asked. David nodded slowly. "Once, under controlled conditions at a military range. But this is different. Natural target, variable conditions, no spotting assistance. It's the kind of challenge that separates theoretical capability from practical application." As he prepared his equipment, David explained the additional complexities of shooting over water. The changing temperature differential between the air and sea surface created atmospheric distortions that could deflect a bullet unpredictably. The salt air affected visibility and could even impact the ballistic performance of the ammunition. "The bullet will take nearly 6 seconds to reach the target," he said, making final adjustments to his scope. "In that time, wind conditions can change, the target can shift due to wave action, and a dozen other variables can introduce error." Sarah watched as David settled into his shooting position with practiced efficiency. His breathing became controlled and rhythmic, and his entire demeanor shifted into intense concentration. She could see years of training and experience in the way he interfaced with his equipment, making minute adjustments with the confidence of someone who understood every component's function. "Would you like to observe through the spotting scope?" David offered, indicating a separate optical device positioned nearby. "You'll have a better view of the target area, and you can help me assess the results." Sarah accepted the invitation, positioning herself behind the powerful spotting scope. Through the magnified view, the distant rock formation suddenly became clearly visible, and she could see the specific outcropping that David was targeting. It was a relatively small protrusion, perhaps the size of a dinner plate from this perspective. As she watched through the scope, David began his final preparation routine. His movements became economical and precise, each action deliberate and practiced. The silence stretched out as he aligned his sights and calculated for the final environmental factors. "This is interesting," David said suddenly, breaking his concentration. "I've been watching your shell collecting technique all week, and I'm curious about something. You seem to have an intuitive understanding of how water currents work, how they deposit materials in specific patterns." Sarah looked up from the spotting scope, unsure where this was leading. "I suppose I've developed a feel for reading the beach over the years, understanding where the tides leave the best specimens." David smiled with what looked like the beginning of an idea. "Ocean currents are fluid dynamics in action, predictable patterns influenced by multiple variables very similar to ballistic calculations. I wonder if your understanding of how the sea moves objects around might translate to understanding how air currents affect projectile flight." The suggestion seemed absurd at first, but as Sarah considered it, she began to see the parallels. Both involved predicting how invisible forces would affect the movement of objects over distance and time. Both required reading subtle environmental cues and understanding complex interactions between multiple variables. "Are you suggesting I might be able to help with your shooting?" Sarah asked, both amused and intrigued by the possibility. "Actually," David said, his expression becoming more serious, "I'm wondering if you'd be interested in trying it yourself. Not the shooting necessarily, but the observation and calculation aspects. I think your scientific background and your intuitive understanding of natural systems might give you a unique perspective on the challenges involved." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had never fired a rifle before, let alone attempted anything approaching this level of precision, but the analytical challenge appealed to her scientific nature, and David's confidence in her abilities was flattering. "What exactly would that involve?" she asked. David gestured toward his equipment and documentation. "We could start with you, helping to read conditions and spot targets. If you're comfortable with it, we could work up to you taking some shots at closer targets. Consider it a practical application of physics and environmental science." The morning sun was climbing higher, and the conditions David had deemed ideal were beginning to change. Sarah realized that whatever decision she made needed to happen quickly. The opportunity was unique, potentially once in a lifetime, and certainly unlike anything she had ever imagined when she first started collecting shells on this remote beach. Sarah surprised herself by accepting David's challenge. What began as curiosity quickly transformed into genuine fascination as he began explaining the science behind extreme long-range shooting. The complexity was far greater than she had imagined, involving principles from physics, meteorology, and mathematics that reminded her of the advanced courses she had taken in graduate school. David started with the basics, showing her how to read wind conditions using natural indicators. Grass movement, water surface patterns, and even the behavior of seabirds could provide crucial information about air currents at different elevations. Sarah found herself applying observational skills she had developed for marine biology in an entirely new context. The bullet doesn't travel in a straight line, David explained, using diagrams drawn in the sand to illustrate ballistic trajectories. Gravity pulls it downward continuously, while air resistance slows it down. At 4,500 meters, the bullet will drop more than 200 feet from its initial path and lose significant velocity. Sarah studied his calculations with growing appreciation for the precision required. Variables she had never considered, like the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, became critical factors at extreme distances. The mathematical models reminded her of the complex equations she used to predict tidal patterns and current flows in her marine research. Over the following days, David systematically taught her to use his various instruments. The rangefinder, weather station, and ballistic computer each served specific functions in solving the puzzle of long-distance accuracy. Sarah discovered she had an aptitude for synthesizing information from multiple sources, a skill that transferred naturally from her scientific background. Her first attempts at shorter-range shooting were surprisingly successful. David attributed this to her methodical approach and ability to remain calm under pressure. Unlike many beginners who became frustrated with missed shots, Sarah treated each attempt as data collection, carefully noting what worked and what needed adjustment. "You have the temperament of a natural marksman," David observed after Sarah successfully hit a target at 800 meters on her third attempt. "Most people let emotion interfere with the process. You're treating it like the scientific experiment it actually is." Sarah felt a satisfaction she hadn't expected. The combination of mental challenge and physical precision was unlike anything in her previous experience. Each successful shot represented the successful solution of a complex problem involving multiple variables and precise execution. As her skills improved, David began sharing more advanced concepts. He explained how atmospheric conditions at different altitudes could affect bullet flight, creating invisible layers of varying air density that could deflect projectiles unpredictably. Weather patterns that seemed stable at ground level might include upper-level disturbances that only became apparent through careful observation and experience. "The military taught me to gather intelligence about my environment," David said, as they studied wind patterns one morning. "But your scientific training gives you a different way of seeing the same phenomena. You understand systems and patterns that I learned to recognize without necessarily understanding why they work." Their collaboration became increasingly sophisticated. Sarah would observe environmental conditions and make predictions about their effects, while David would verify her assessments through his equipment and shooting results. Her success rate at intermediate distances improved rapidly as she learned to trust her analytical abilities. The breakthrough came during their second week of training together. Sarah had been studying the way morning thermal currents affected wind patterns over the water, drawing parallels to ocean upwelling phenomena she knew from her marine biology work. Her observations led to a prediction about optimal shooting conditions that proved remarkably accurate. "I think you're ready to attempt some serious long-range work," David announced, after Sarah consistently hit targets at 1,500 meters. "Your understanding of environmental systems is giving you insights that take most shooters years to develop." Sarah felt both excitement and nervousness as David began setting up for shots beyond 2,000 meters. The targets became almost invisible to the naked eye, requiring complete reliance on optical equipment and mathematical calculations. The margin for error decreased dramatically as distances increased. Her first attempt at 2,500 meters missed completely, the bullet impacting somewhere in the water far from the intended target. But instead of discouragement, Sarah felt motivated to understand what had gone wrong. She and David spent an hour analyzing conditions and calculations, identifying several factors that had contributed to the miss. The second attempt came much closer. Through the spotting scope, Sarah could see the splash pattern indicating the bullet had struck within a few meters of the target rock. The near miss felt like a victory, proof that her analytical approach was working even at these extreme distances. "Remarkable progress," David commented as they reviewed the day's results. "Most military snipers require months of specialized training to achieve this level of consistency at long range. Your scientific background is definitely accelerating the learning process." As Sarah packed her equipment that evening, she realized how completely this experience had captured her imagination. The shell collecting that had brought her to this beach now seemed like a simple hobby compared to the complex challenge of extreme precision shooting. She found herself thinking about ballistic calculations during her regular workday and looking forward to each morning session with David. The 4,500-meter target remained their ultimate goal, still seeming impossibly distant and challenging. But Sarah's confidence was growing with each successful shot, and she was beginning to believe that David's initial assessment of her potential might prove correct. More importantly, she was discovering capabilities within herself that she had never suspected. The combination of scientific analysis, environmental awareness, and precise execution required skills that drew on every aspect of her education and experience. What had started as a chance encounter was transforming into something that felt like a true calling. David had begun discussing advanced techniques used by military snipers for extreme range engagements, including methods for dealing with moving targets and rapidly changing conditions. Sarah realized that accepting his challenge had opened up an entirely new world of possibilities, one that combined intellectual rigor with practical application in ways her academic career never had. 3 weeks into their unlikely partnership, Sarah had progressed to consistently hitting targets at 3,000 meters under favorable conditions. David expressed amazement at her rapid development, attributing her success to the unique combination of scientific methodology and intuitive understanding of natural systems that she brought to the challenge. The morning that would change everything began with nearly perfect conditions. A high-pressure system had settled over the coast, bringing stable temperatures and minimal wind variation. Visibility was exceptional, with the distant rock formations clearly visible even without magnification. David had been monitoring weather patterns for days, waiting for exactly these conditions. "Today feels different," David announced as he began his elaborate equipment setup. "Everything is aligning for a serious attempt at the 4,500-meter target. The question is whether you're ready to take the shot." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Over the past weeks, she had watched David make several attempts at the maximum range with mixed results. Even with his decades of experience, the extreme distance challenged every aspect of his skill and equipment. The idea that she might be capable of such a shot seemed both thrilling and intimidating. Their preparation routine had become sophisticated and thorough. Weather monitoring began before dawn, tracking temperature changes, barometric pressure, and wind patterns at multiple altitudes. Sarah had developed her own system for reading environmental conditions, combining David's military techniques with her understanding of oceanic and atmospheric systems. "The thermal layer above the water is unusually stable this morning," Sarah observed, studying the sea surface through binoculars. "The temperature differential is minimal, which should reduce atmospheric distortion, and the wind pattern suggests steady conditions for at least another 2 hours." David nodded approvingly as he verified her assessments with his instruments. Their collaboration had evolved to the point where each brought unique expertise to the problem-solving process. Sarah's scientific background provided theoretical understanding, while David's experience offered practical application methods. As they worked through ballistic calculations, Sarah suggested modifications to David's standard approach. Her analysis of local microclimates had revealed subtle patterns in air current behavior that weren't captured in standard meteorological models. These insights had already improved their accuracy at intermediate ranges. "Your environmental readings are consistently more accurate than my standard references," David admitted as he incorporated Sarah's wind assessments into his calculations. "I'm beginning to think your marine science background gives you a better understanding of fluid dynamics than traditional military training provides." The mathematical complexity of the 4,500-meter shot was staggering. Bullet drop would exceed 300 feet, requiring precise elevation adjustments. Wind drift calculations involved predicting air current effects over a flight time of nearly 7 seconds. Even minor errors in any single variable could result in misses measured in tens of meters. Sarah found herself deeply engaged with the analytical challenge. The problem combined elements of physics, environmental science and practical engineering in ways that drew on every aspect of her education. The intellectual satisfaction of solving such a complex puzzle was as rewarding as the physical act of shooting itself. Their first serious attempt at maximum range began with Sarah serving as spotter and environmental analyst, while David took the shot. Her job was to track conditions continuously and provide real-time updates on any changes that might affect the bullet's flight path. Through the powerful spotting scope, Sarah watched the distant target with intense concentration. The rock formation appeared as a small dark shape against the lighter background of sea and sky. At this magnification, even small waves washing over the base of the rocks were clearly visible. David's shot preparation took nearly 10 minutes as he made final adjustments, based on Sarah's environmental readings. The precision required was absolute. There would be no opportunity for quick follow-up shots if conditions changed. The rifle's report was surprisingly muted, the sound dampened by distance and absorbed by the ocean environment. Sarah maintained focus on the target area, watching for any indication of bullet impact. Several seconds passed before she saw a small splash appear in the water approximately 50 meters to the right of the intended target. "Close," David said with satisfaction. "Much closer than my previous attempts. Your wind calculations were nearly perfect, but I think I undercompensated for the lateral thermal drift." They spent the next hour analyzing the shot and adjusting their approach. Sarah's detailed observations of the impact pattern provided crucial feedback for improving their calculations. The collaborative process felt like conducting a complex scientific experiment with immediate, measurable results. The second attempt incorporated lessons learned from the first. Sarah had detected a subtle shift in thermal patterns that suggested adjusting their wind compensation. David made corresponding modifications to his scope settings and holdover calculations. This shot came even closer, impacting within 20 meters of the target. Through the spotting scope, Sarah could see spray patterns that indicated the bullet had struck very near the base of the rock formation. The improvement was encouraging and suggested that their analytical approach was working. "I think you should take the next shot," David said suddenly, his expression serious but confident. "Your environmental analysis is more accurate than mine, and your shooting has become remarkably consistent. More importantly, you understand the science behind what we're trying to accomplish better than most trained snipers." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline at the suggestion. The idea of attempting such an extreme shot was both terrifying and exhilarating. Everything she had learned over the past weeks had been building toward this moment, though she had never explicitly acknowledged it as a goal. The weight of the rifle felt familiar now as Sarah settled into the shooting position David had taught her. The scope's magnification brought the distant target into sharp focus, though it still appeared impossibly small and remote. Her heart rate accelerated as she began her final preparation routine. David positioned himself behind the spotting scope, ready to observe and provide guidance. "Remember everything we've discussed about environmental factors," he said calmly. "Trust your calculations and your instincts. The science is sound, and your execution has been consistently excellent." Sarah began her breathing routine, allowing her body to settle into the focused state that had become familiar through weeks of practice. The analytical part of her mind continued processing environmental data even as she prepared for the physical act of shooting. Wind patterns, temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure all factored into her final calculations. The moment of truth was approaching, and Sarah realized that regardless of the outcome, this experience had already transformed her understanding of what she was capable of achieving. The shy shell collector who had stumbled onto this beach weeks ago seemed like a different person entirely. Sarah's finger rested lightly on the trigger as she made her final scope adjustments. 4,500 meters stretched between her position and the target rock, an almost unimaginable distance for precision shooting. The mathematics were perfect, the environmental conditions optimal, and her preparation as thorough as possible. Everything came down to this single moment. Through her scope, the target appeared as a small, irregular shape against the backdrop of endless ocean. Waves washed rhythmically over its base, creating a constantly changing pattern of light and shadow. Sarah had to time her shot between wave cycles to ensure the target remained visible and stable. David's voice came quietly from behind the spotting scope. Wind is holding steady at 4 knots from the northwest. Temperature stable. Atmospheric. Conditions unchanged. You have a perfect window for the next 90 seconds. Sarah felt remarkably calm despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Weeks of scientific analysis and systematic practice had prepared her for exactly this moment. Her understanding of environmental factors, combined with the methodical approach David had taught her, gave her confidence in her calculations and preparation. The crosshairs settled naturally on the target as Sarah controlled her breathing. The rifle had become an extension of her analytical process, a precision instrument for testing theoretical calculations against physical reality. Years of scientific training had taught her to trust in methodical preparation and systematic execution. Her heart rate slowed as she entered the focused state that had become familiar through countless practice sessions. The world narrowed to the essential elements: target, environmental conditions, and the mathematical relationships that would determine success or failure. Everything else faded into irrelevance. The trigger brake was smooth and surprising, exactly as David had taught her. The rifle's recoil was absorbed by proper technique and the solid shooting position they had perfected together. Sarah immediately returned to the scope, tracking toward the target area to observe results. Nearly 7 seconds passed before anything happened. Sarah maintained steady observation through her scope, while David monitored through the spotting equipment. The silence stretched out as the bullet traveled its impossible trajectory, affected by gravity, wind, atmospheric pressure, and dozens of other variables they had spent weeks learning to calculate. The impact was visible as a brief flash against the dark rock surface, followed immediately by fragments and spray patterns that confirmed a direct hit. Sarah stared through, her scope in disbelief, while David let out a shout of excitement from behind his spotting scope. "Target hit," David called out, his usually controlled demeanor replaced by obvious excitement. "Direct center mass impact on the target rock. Absolutely perfect shot." Sarah remained in position for several more seconds, verifying the hit through her scope. The evidence was unmistakable. Her bullet had struck exactly where she had aimed, achieving what many considered one of the most challenging shots possible under field conditions. The mathematical precision and environmental analysis had translated into physical success. As the reality of her achievement began to sink in, Sarah felt a combination of exhilaration and profound satisfaction. The shot represented the successful solution of an incredibly complex problem involving physics, environmental science, and precise execution. It was the kind of intellectual and practical challenge she had never known existed. David approached with obvious admiration and respect. "That was extraordinary shooting," he said, shaking her hand formally. "In 20 years of military service and civilian precision shooting, I've seen very few people achieve that level of accuracy at extreme range. Your scientific approach and natural ability combined into something remarkable." Sarah felt transformed by the experience. The shell collector who had accidentally discovered David's shooting position weeks ago seemed like a completely different person. She had discovered capabilities within herself that she never suspected, combining her scientific training with practical skills in ways that produced extraordinary results. Their celebration was interrupted by an unexpected sound: the distant rumble of helicopter rotors approaching from inland. David's expression immediately shifted from celebration to concern as he quickly began scanning the horizon with binoculars. "That's not a civilian aircraft," he said tersely, his military training evident in how quickly he assessed the potential threat. "The flight pattern suggests official interest in this area. We may have attracted unwanted attention." Sarah felt a chill of apprehension as the reality of their situation became clear. They had been conducting precision shooting exercises with military-grade equipment on public land without proper permits or notifications. The successful extreme-range shot that had felt like such a triumph moments before now seemed like evidence of activities that might be difficult to explain to authorities. The helicopter appeared over the coastal hills, flying in a deliberate search pattern that suggested they were looking for something specific. David's equipment setup, while well concealed from casual observation, would be obvious to anyone conducting an aerial survey of the area. "We need to secure everything quickly," David said, beginning to disassemble his rifle with practiced efficiency. "The shooting itself isn't illegal, but the equipment and our presence here without notification could raise questions we'd prefer not to answer." Sarah helped pack the sophisticated measurement devices and spotting equipment, amazed at how quickly their peaceful morning had transformed into a potentially serious situation. The achievement that had felt so significant minutes before was now secondary to avoiding complications with law enforcement or military authorities. As they worked to conceal the evidence of their activities, David explained that precision shooting at extreme ranges sometimes attracted attention from security services, particularly when conducted near sensitive coastal areas. The combination of military-grade equipment and exceptional accuracy could be misinterpreted as preparation for hostile activities. The helicopter made several passes over their area, clearly conducting a systematic search. Through binoculars, Sarah could see official markings that suggested military or law enforcement origin. The aircraft's crew was undoubtedly using advanced sensors to scan for unusual activities or equipment signatures. "Your shot was probably detected by acoustic monitoring systems," David explained as they finished concealing their equipment. "A precision rifle report at that range creates a distinctive sound signature that automated detection systems are designed to identify and locate." Sarah realized that her moment of triumph had inadvertently announced their presence to anyone monitoring the coastal area for unusual activities. The scientific achievement that had felt so personal and satisfying was now the source of potential legal complications. David's military experience proved valuable as he guided them through proper procedures for interacting with authorities if approached. His knowledge of regulations and protocols helped Sarah understand how to present their activities in the most favorable light possible. The helicopter eventually moved on to search other areas, suggesting that the crew had not positively identified their location or activities. David and Sarah remained concealed until the aircraft disappeared entirely, then began the careful process of determining whether it was safe to resume normal activities. "Regardless of the complications," David said, as they waited to ensure the area was secure, "what you accomplished today was extraordinary. That shot will stand as one of the finest examples of precision marksmanship I've ever witnessed. Your scientific approach produced results that most trained snipers never achieve." Sarah felt a complex mixture of pride and concern as they carefully monitored the situation. The successful shot represented a personal breakthrough that had expanded her understanding of her own capabilities, but the attention it had attracted reminded her that exceptional achievements sometimes came with unexpected consequences. As the immediate danger passed and they began to relax, Sarah realized that this experience had fundamentally changed her perspective on herself and her abilities. The methodical shell collector had discovered that she possessed remarkable talents for analytical problem-solving and precision execution under pressure. The helicopter incident had added an element of real-world consequence to what had begun as an intellectual exercise. Sarah understood now that the skills she had developed over the past weeks had practical applications that extended far beyond recreational shooting or scientific curiosity. The helicopter incident marked the end of David and Sarah's collaboration on the Cornwall coast, but it was far from the end of her journey with precision shooting. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself unable to stop thinking about the analytical challenges and precise execution that had made their partnership so successful. David had departed quietly after ensuring that no official interest would follow their activities. Before leaving, he provided Sarah with contacts in the civilian precision shooting community and recommended several competitions where her unique approach might be appreciated. His final assessment of her potential was both encouraging and challenging. "You have natural abilities that most shooters spend decades trying to develop," he told her during their farewell conversation. "More importantly, your scientific methodology gives you advantages that traditional training approaches can't match. Don't let this experience end here." Sarah returned to her normal routine of teaching marine biology and collecting shells. But everything felt different now. The methodical observation skills she had always applied to understanding ocean ecosystems had been revealed as transferable to entirely different challenges. Her morning walks on the beach became opportunities to practice reading environmental conditions with the precision David had taught her. She began researching the civilian competitive shooting community, discovering a world of precision rifle competitions that emphasized exactly the analytical skills she had developed. Long-range shooting sports had evolved into sophisticated technical challenges that attracted engineers, scientists, and other professionals who appreciated the mathematical complexity involved. Her first competition was a regional precision rifle match held at a private range in Scotland. Sarah entered as a complete novice, knowing no one and uncertain about how her unconventional background would be received by experienced competitors. The event proved to be a revelation about both her capabilities and the broader community of precision shooting enthusiasts. The competition format involved multiple stages at varying distances, each presenting different technical challenges. Targets ranged from 600 to 1,500 meters, with environmental conditions that changed throughout the day. Sarah's approach of treating each stage as a scientific experiment attracted attention from other competitors and match officials. Her performance exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The systematic environmental analysis and mathematical approach that David had helped her develop proved highly effective under competition conditions. Sarah finished third overall in her first match, an unprecedented result for someone with only weeks of experience. More importantly, she discovered a community of like-minded individuals who shared her appreciation for precision, analysis, and continuous improvement. Many competitors had technical backgrounds in engineering, physics, or other scientific disciplines. They welcomed Sarah's unique perspective and were eager to learn from her environmental analysis techniques. Over the following months, Sarah's reputation in the precision shooting community grew rapidly. Her scientific approach to reading conditions and calculating ballistic solutions became legendary among competitors. Match directors began seeking her participation in prestigious events, and equipment manufacturers started consulting with her about product development. The transformation from marine biology teacher to competitive precision shooter attracted media attention that Sarah initially found uncomfortable. Reporters were fascinated by the story of a shell collector who had accidentally discovered extraordinary shooting abilities through chance encounter with a former military sniper. Sarah learned to use the attention constructively, promoting the scientific and analytical aspects of precision shooting sports. She emphasized how the disciplines required similar skills to her academic research: careful observation, systematic data collection, hypothesis testing, and precise execution based on thorough preparation. Her teaching career evolved to incorporate lessons learned from precision shooting. Students in her marine biology classes benefited from her enhanced ability to communicate complex analytical processes and the importance of systematic observation. The confidence she had gained through shooting competition made her a more effective educator. The shell collecting that had started everything remained an important part of Sarah's routine, but it had been transformed by her expanded understanding of environmental systems. Her analysis of beach conditions now incorporated techniques learned from ballistic calculations, making her more effective at predicting where rare specimens might be deposited. 2 years after that first encounter with David, Sarah found herself representing her country at the World Long Range Shooting Championships. The event brought together the finest precision rifle competitors from around the globe, testing skills at distances that would have seemed impossible when she first started collecting shells on the Cornwall coast. As she prepared for the championship's final stage, a 1,000-meter shot under challenging wind conditions, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The analytical skills that had made her an effective marine biology researcher had proven applicable to challenges she never could have imagined. The target appeared tiny through her competition scope, but Sarah felt the calm confidence that had become familiar through hundreds of practice sessions and dozens of competitions. Her environmental analysis was complete, ballistic calculations verified, and equipment perfectly prepared. The shot felt perfect from the moment she squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet impact exactly where she had aimed, securing the championship title and establishing her as one of the world's finest precision rifle competitors. Standing on the podium afterwards, medal around her, neck and national anthem playing, Sarah thought about the morning she had first encountered David's concealed shooting position. A simple walk to collect shells had led to discovering capabilities she never knew she possessed and opening doors to experiences beyond anything she had previously imagined. The shell collector had become a world champion, but more importantly, she had learned that analytical minds and systematic approaches could be applied to challenges far beyond traditional academic boundaries. Her story had become proof that extraordinary achievements were possible when scientific methodology combined with natural ability and proper guidance. As she looked out over the competition range where her precision had just earned recognition, as the finest in the world, Sarah smiled at the thought of her next morning walk on the beach. There would always be shells to collect, but now she knew that every step held the potential for discoveries that could change everything.